Hi everyone, Carol and Kristen with Luminous Ministries, and today we are very blessed to be talking about the Feast of Corpus Christi, which is going to be coming up. Actually, this Thursday is the actual feast day, but in countries where it's not a holy day of obligation, which it is not in the United States, it is celebrated on the Sunday after Trinity Sunday, which was last Sunday. So very, very special feast day because it's all about the real presence of Christ in the body, blood, you know, that whole transubstantiation piece, and how Jesus died and was resurrected, and then his body, blood, soul, and divinity is present to us in the Eucharist, in the wine and the bread, and really present to us. So this is something that we, I think, sort of take for granted as Catholics, as Christians, and we absolutely should not. Agreed, Kristen?
I agree. No, and I think that we, a former priest at our parish, Father Charles Ritter, he said it this way in a homily once, because you might say to yourself, well, isn't Jesus always present to me? And the answer is yes, Jesus is always present to you. But he gave this analogy, and I might have turned it into my own lingo now, it was so long ago. But, essentially, like, if you're talking to someone via text, are you in communication with that person? Are they present to you? Yes, they are. But how is that different than when you're talking to them on the phone? And now you can hear their tone of voice. How does that change the presence? Yeah. And then, when you're in the same room and you can see their facial expressions and you can actually touch them, how is that presence different? And then how is it different when you're sitting right next to each other or giving each other a hug? How is that presence different? And the bottom line is it's all presence, but
there's presence and there's presence and there's presence. And
and I just think that's such a great analogy because I do think it can get confusing. Well, does that mean Jesus is only present to us in the Eucharist? No, but that is where he is the most present, and that's why this is such a beautiful gift that we have as Catholics.
So why would we want to miss that? I mean, why would we want to not be at Mass as often as we possibly can? Right. So I was kind of going through, I have a little journal that I keep, and I have a bunch of little teeny mini journals, and
we almost lost one yesterday in a little minor fire, but no big deal. Yeah.
That's a story for another day.
Another day. But anyway, back to the journal that we didn't lose. Had a little bit of water damage.
We saved the journal. We did save the journal. But I have one little mini journal that's just entitled The Eucharist. And, because I want to always remind myself of how precious of a gift the Eucharist is to me.
And I think that's so important too because it is such a mystery. Yeah. And I think that is part of the problem for some people is that, it is hard to wrap your mind around. And so I think that's so great that this is what you're doing to constantly remind yourself of what
we talked about it in one of our videos last week about the fact that when we receive Jesus in the real presence of the Eucharist, we receive graces, special graces each time, and those graces are different at each reception of the Eucharist, and we never know for sure what those graces are going to be. I was in Mass this morning, and I was just thinking, gosh, I feel like I need a lot of different graces today, but I wonder what graces God is actually gifting me with. And whatever it is, it's the best thing for me. I know that.
No, I was thinking about it too since we talked about it. And I was thinking, I don't know, I seem to struggle with the same things. I probably just need all the same graces all the time.
I think most people would agree with that statement that we tend to keep going back to our same struggles, and I know
the struggle is real.
The struggle is real. I know that happens to me when I'm in reconciliation. I feel like, gosh, I should be getting better with this, and I just don't feel like I'm making much progress. So which is another reason we carry on, and that's another reason why we so desperately need the Eucharist. If I always say that if we could physically see what is happening when we receive the Eucharist, we would want to receive it daily, and we would crawl on our knees as they do in many countries to receive the Eucharist, and it's that precious.
I know from some of your research, talking about, our ancestors were willing to die to get to the Eucharist. Right. And do we have that same...
Speaking of that, so that was one of the things that was in my journal that I decided to share with you. And this came from James Stenson, who is a contributor at Catholic Answers. But what he had to say was exactly that. He was talking about our ancestors actually risked persecution, even death, to be able to take part in Mass. He said, when you have children someday, they will need the graces and strength that come from the Mass. If you fail to pass it on because of your own indifference, you will do the gravest injustice to them and to God. You have the power to snuff out in one generation, he says. Get a load of this. You have the power to snuff out in one generation the faith that has sustained your family for generations. Wow. This is an enormous responsibility. You will have to answer to God for it. So, not to put the fear of God in you, but seriously, that's how serious it is. Mm-hmm. And, you have all these generations. I know in my family, on both sides, generations and generations of great faithfulness. Mm-hmm. And, I oftentimes think about my ancestors and their great faithfulness and the fact that their faithfulness has helped me to have the faith that I feel I have today. Right. So, and I'm always working on my faith because it needs a lot of work.
It's a moment to moment.
It's a moment to moment thing. It is, but I feel like the Mass, and in particular the Eucharist, is the greatest prayer that I could pray. I think it is the most profound. I think it is where we receive the most grace. And I just know that even though I cannot physically see it or even feel it, and maybe not even sense it, I still know the truth about it. And the truth is that in the Eucharist, I am receiving the actual real presence of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And that if I don't have that, I can't function very well.
And just in case you're not Catholic, or you're Catholic and you've forgotten why we believe this, there's a lot of different places in the Bible that talk about this, but specifically we often go to the 6th chapter of John, where Jesus gives the bread of life discourse, and he's talking about how, I am the bread of life, and if you do not eat my body, you do not have life within you. And, it's important to note that Jesus had a lot of followers who then said, this is difficult to accept, and they left. And the thing is, if Jesus was speaking merely about a symbol, there's nothing difficult to accept about that. Right. It's a symbol, no big deal. But they knew he wasn't talking symbolically, and they said, whoa, this is difficult to accept, and we're not accepting it, and so we're leaving. And the thing is, Jesus was all about the truth. If this was a miscommunication, Jesus would have absolutely wanted to clear it.
He would have cleared that up right now.
Set that straight.
Whoa, come back. Yeah. Come back.
Because he wasn't about bringing confusion. He was about bringing the truth. Now, that might cause some confusion in your own soul because you're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard this truth before. Right. But he wasn't about losing people to a miscommunication. And so, just to come back to, and all throughout John specifically talks about it so much, but also St. Paul in different letters, and also this was the belief of the church until for a very, very long time, everyone believed in the true presence. And it wasn't for a really long time that then all of a sudden, splits started happening and everything else. But so this is the teaching of the apostles. This is the teaching of Jesus. This is the teaching of the church. So, just in case, you need to just go back to it. Maybe you've gotten away from that belief, or, you're saying, oh, you know what, Lord, I do want to believe. Help my unbelief. Right. Yet again, I think that's one of the greatest prayers. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Right. Because it is all mystery, and it is hard to wrap our minds around. But it doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean it's not true. And it's a real gift to us.
It is a real gift to us. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the other things that I had written in my journal, which just every time I read this, I'm like, oh, this comes from St. John Bosco. And he said, the longer you stay away from communion, the more your soul will become weak, and in the end, you will become dangerously indifferent. Dangerously indifferent.
I don't know how I can't look at the world and say that that's true.
Absolutely. The whole concept that it's so easy to get into a bad habit, and maybe you miss 1 week, and then it's another week, and another,
right.
And that's how easily a bad habit can get started.
Right.
And we think about how people look at their bodies, and they are very concerned about keeping their bodies looking great, but are they, so they're exercising their bodies, they may be eating healthy foods and whatnot, and I think how often if they were as concerned about the condition of their souls. I mean, in that piece, the longer you stay away from communion, the more your soul will become weak. And when you think about it, Kristen, I mean, like, what is more important, to have a strong physical body or to have a strong soul? I mean, we are on this earth for such a speck of time. I'm reminded of when my sister was sick and dying. The doctor said to her, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "Cure my cancer." And he said to her, "The most important thing you could be doing is to make sure that you are right with God." And then he made the point that if you were to take your pinky and dip it in the ocean and pull it back out, that the water on your finger would represent the amount of time that she or any of us will spend on this earth. But if you were to look at the entire ocean, you could see the amount of time that we will spend in eternity. And yet we put so much credence on this little speck of time in our lives here, and worry about physical things. And we worry about the secular, and we worry about, everyday comings and goings, when really our whole point of being here is to prepare ourselves for the next. The point of being in this world is to prepare ourselves for the next world. And the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist is the utmost important thing that we could be doing or partaking in to prepare ourselves for the next world, and to have our souls ready for the next world. So that quote just really gets to me. And here's a more contemporary person, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who is in New York, of course, and I think he's considered to be the highest ranking cardinal in the United States. He says about the Eucharist that the Eucharist is the most beautiful, powerful prayer that we have. To miss it is to miss Jesus, his word, his people, his presence, his body, and his blood. To miss it is to miss Jesus. Yeah. To miss it is to miss Jesus. That's a good line.
That's a good line.
So, I mean, that kind of just puts it right in perspective. So,
right.
It does. So, it comes back to that. We always say, what's a technique we could use to get ourselves to develop better habits? And one of the most obvious is just do it. Right. Just do it.
Right.
And why? Because it's the right thing to do. You get down to that. Going through life is difficult, and I don't know who out there amongst you would think that it isn't, but Kristen and I are both in the camp that says life is difficult, and I think most people are. So why would we want to go through life without that great gift of the Eucharist? That is such a powerful, beautiful gift of grace. And if we only knew, I keep coming back to this, but if we only knew.
Right, and the thing that's super cool is that unlike a lot of other feasts, you're celebrating something that happened in the past. We're celebrating something that happens every single day.
Right.
That's what's so neat, too, about the Feast of Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing celebration. So we hope that come Sunday, this is maybe whet your appetite, that if you've kind of gotten away from thinking about the true presence, or maybe you've gotten away from coming to Mass, or maybe, you want to get back to going more frequently than just once a week.
Right.
That this will help you to get excited and supercharged about the fact that there's presence, and then there's presence,
and then there's presence.
Yeah.
We're all on a journey, right?
Absolutely.
We're all on a journey, and that journey, we're not on the journey alone. We're not on the journey alone. God is here with us, and he makes himself present to us in the actual real presence of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ in the Eucharist. So
absolutely. So if you're feeling inspired by today's video and you want to support the work of Luminous Ministries, please visit our website at www.luminousministries.com/donate. Thanks so much for being with us today, everybody. We will pray that you have a very profound experience of Christ's presence this Sunday, as when, like Mom said, or before, as we celebrate that ongoing, continual, everyday beauty of the Feast of Corpus Christi.